Hey everyone, this is Mike, and in the announcement showcase for 6.0, they of course announced that we're going to be getting a new healer, Sage, but they also mentioned that they're going to be dividing the healer into two separate roles, the pure healer role and the barrier healer role, or regen versus shield. We'd have both White Mage and Astrologian as the pure healers, and we'd have Sage and Scholar as our barrier healers. Now, to make this a reality, they were also going to be changing Astrologian slightly again, because of course right now Astrologian can do both regen as well as shields. They will be taking away the Nocturnal Sect and also slightly changing some other abilities about Astrologian. In my opinion, I don't personally think this is going to be a very big change as to what the Diurnal Astrologian is like right now. Of course, we'll have to wait and see until we get access to, for example, footage from the media tour, or when the expansion actually comes out, where we get some more information about what's actually going to be happening to Astrologian. Of course, a lot of people were pretty bummed out about this because Astrologian seems to be changing every single patch almost at this point, with their car system being changed, now again them changing their heals. In patch 5.1 I think it was, they made Nocturnal Astrologian better as well, so it's kind of weird that they just keep changing the job, but regardless, they're going to be doing it again in 6.0 to kind of make this role division a little bit more pronounced. Now, when they first said this, a lot of people were kind of concerned, do we always need to have a regen healer plus a shield healer in our party now? Personally, I don't really think that's going to be the case, and there's a few reasons as to why that is, and I'm going to try to explain those in this video. Now, the first reason that I don't think this is going to be that much of an issue is because when we cast back about 2 years ago, back when we were getting announcement stuff for Shadowbringers, they mentioned that they wanted to do this to the tank role as well. They wanted to have 2 main tanks and 2 off tanks in the game. And when we look at the tank role right now, it's probably the best balanced role in the whole game at the moment. It's a fantastic time to be playing a tank. But there isn't really a very clear division between main tank and off tank. When I look at all the tanks specifically, Dark Knight fits literally anywhere. There's no reason why you want a main tank or off tank. Warrior is probably best as the main tank purely because you have a very short cooldown on your invuln, and also you have Equilibrium, but outside of those two things, there's no real need for you to be a main tank. Gunbreaker can do both fine. Main tanking is maybe a little bit harder because moving the boss around during your burst window can be a bit tricky, but outside of that minor inconvenience, there's no real reason to not play Gunbreaker as a main tank. And when it comes down to Paladin, yeah, that one probably wants to be off tank because you lose damage on spirits within as your HP drops lower. If you're not taking auto attacks, you're gonna stay at full HP more often. And Passage of Arms is also kind of tricky to aim at your party when you're standing in front of the boss. So outside of Warrior kind of wanting to be main tank because of Equilibrium, Paladin wanting to be off tank because of spirits within and wings, there isn't really a real reason for anyone to be any position, and any tank combination works as well. So I don't really think that they went in all too deep in this main tank off tank philosophy going into Shadowbringers, even though that they mentioned that they wanted to do something like this. So that's kind of reason number one as to why I think that this shield healer versus pure healer is going to be all that big of an issue in the first place, as they might not even go through with it, kind of like how they didn't do it with main tank off tank back in Shadowbringers when they first announced that as well. Second reason is because 99% of the content in this game does not care about your team composition either. Yes, when we look at Ultimate or high-end Savage raiding, and when I say high-end Savage, I mean stuff like week 1, week 2 clears, because that is where your team composition matters a whole lot more, because you're dealing with minimum item level, stuff hurts a lot, your heals are not going to be as strong, your HP isn't as high either, so that is where your team composition matters a whole lot more. But once you go into a few weeks into the Savage raid tier where people have more gear, you're of course going to have more HP, your heals are going to be doing more as well. That is where your team composition doesn't really matter as much anymore as it does in week 1. Of course, when it comes down to Ultimate, that is a kind of a different story, because Ultimate you technically can't outgear, even though if you look at UCOP and UWO, those you technically outgear at this point because of how gear scaling works, going down to level 70. But that aside, basically you shouldn't be able to outgear Ultimate, or at least when you're clearing it, when it is on content, that isn't something where your team composition just wouldn't matter. I believe that for Ultimate you'll still want a shield healer and a regen healer. For week 1, week 2 Savage progression, you'll want to have that as well. But as long as you're not doing either of those things, I personally don't think your team composition matters all that much. And I think the previous raid tier that we had is a very good example of that. When we went into that previous raid tier, me and my static did some speed killing as well. We just messed around with certain jobs here or there as well because the raid tier just lasted that long. And when my static played White Mage Astrologian, our Astrologian actually played Diurnal Astrologian quite often, and I was kind of surprised by this at first, because I was always of the assumption that when you play together with a White Mage, you want to play Nocturnal to bring shields. But that isn't necessarily the case, because Neutral Sect exists, and that usually takes care of a lot of your shielding necessity as well. And then pair it together with the mitigation that the rest of your team brings to the table. You have 2 tanks, you have, well, melee DPS don't really bring that much, but for example, ranged physical caster, double caster is something that has been gaining a lot of popularity ever since the second raid tier as well. So there's basically a lot of other tools going around that can help with mitigation. They might kind of get rid of the need of having a shield healer in the party. Of course, when it comes down to, for example, having double scholar, while I do know that in savage groups it's not really run, but for example in Duty Finder you come across it quite often because they don't really care about what healers that they throw into your party, either when you're doing a 24-man raid, or for example when you're just queuing for an extreme trial, well, when you're joining a party finder for an extreme trial, because raid finder isn't really used all that much on the EU and NA data centers. But basically, you can clear any content with any healer combination, double White Mage, double Scholar. I'm excluding Astrologian from this because they can switch their stance depending on what they are paired together with, but it works just fine having whatever healing combo together, mainly because if you have double White Mage, you still have 6 other players in the party that can help out with mitigation as well. And if you have double Scholar, you're already gonna have good mitigation, but Scholar still has tools to have a decent healing output as well that isn't paired to mitigation. You have Indom, you have Excog, you have your Fairy that can do a bunch of stuff by both shielding, the tether, the AoE heals that come from your Fairy as well. You also still have Emergency Tactics, which turns your shields into heals as well on a short cooldown. So there are still a lot of things that Scholar has to be a quote-unquote pure healer as well, when they need to be. And I believe that that is the reason why, as long as they don't see too many changes to their toolkit, like for example if they were to take away Emergency Tactics or the regen that is on the Fairy or whatnot, as long as they don't take those things away, and as long as they also don't take away the mitigation that White Mage and Astrologian still have in their regen stances, like for example Diurnal Astrologian still brings a decent amount of mitigation to the party as well. Yes, it might not be as much as what a Scholar can bring, but White Mage and Astral still has some mitigation in their toolkit as well, and that pairs together with tanks mitigation, casters as well as ranged, yeah, melees, I'm leaving you out here again, because Feint isn't really all that useful when it comes down to raid wide mitigation for the most part. But still, there's a lot of other mitigation in your party, and if your party is on the same page about using that mitigation as well, might not always be as easy to get that done inside of Party Finder, but if you're playing in a static, then that is something that you can definitely get done. Then getting double regen healer or double shield healer definitely shouldn't be a problem to go together just as well as if you were to play regen plus shield healer. Will things be a little bit trickier than if you were to just go shield and regen? Probably, but will it be impossible? Definitely not. Any team composition has always been able to clear anything. Even going back to the example of ultimates have been solo healed at this point, so they can definitely be done with a combination of double regen or double shield healer as well. Quite sure that it will be done in the next expansion at some point as well, so that is why I am personally not all too concerned about the changes that are coming to our healers. Anyways, that's my take on the subject. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this, if you want to add anything to the conversation. And on that note, I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my patrons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.